This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 160.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Marjaba.
What's up, SE family? Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Ramsey Marjaba, and as you can see, I am not accompanied by my amazing co-host, Binaya Kunungo, otherwise known as Benny. Now that I'm back at work, it seems that it's hard for us to get together, so I'm finding random times to record a few minutes here and there. But hopefully we can get our rhythm back and actually get back to recording these intros and outros together, because I'm really looking forward to it. As much as I enjoy talking to you, I am in fact talking to a camera, so having someone on the other end is actually very fun. So if you're listening to this on the day where it comes out, on the Monday that it comes out, I will be speaking in a couple of days at Consensus Demo Fest. It's on the 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. My topic is how to get the most out of your salesperson, basically, and setting expectations and all that. And speaking of Consensus, let's hear a word from our show sponsor. Thanks, Consensus, for sponsoring the show. I'm looking forward to actually speaking to a lot of sales engineers at Demo Fest. Now, sales engineering, we talk about it and we feel like it's reserved for the IT world or networking or SaaS, but it's not only there. Like, mechanical engineers have salespeople. Sales engineers have sales. Civil engineers have salespeople. So do chemical engineers. They have sales engineers and salespeople, or a combination of those. And so there are paths into sales engineering if you're outside, if you're not necessarily working in front of a computer all day. So I've been wanting to talk to someone from that world for a while. I did talk to Arthur Fromm a while back. He's a civil engineer, but he ended up selling software to other civil engineers. I wanted to talk to someone who actually doesn't do that. I wanted to talk to someone who sells physical equipment. So that's where our guest, Ken Lambert, comes in. And amongst other things, he was a sales engineer, or he is a sales engineer, and he worked for a structural engineering firm, or he sold to structural engineering firms, I should say that. What that means, I guess I'll let him tell you as we jump into the show. Good afternoon, Ken. How are you?
Doing good. How you doing, Ramsey?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on. For the folks listening who don't know who you are, although you are sort of famous, and I mean that, like, you are famous, and
right.
Who are you?
Thank
what do you do? And let us know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks. So my name is Ken Lambert. I'm the president and founder of this association, which is NAASE, because it's very long to say the whole name, but we'll say it a couple times here, I'm sure, on this call. It's the North American Association of Sales Engineers. It doesn't really flow off the tongue, but at least it describes who we are and what we're doing. So I founded this association, professional association, back really in last May and June. Really in June, we kind of launched. In April, did sort of the early work, and in May, kind of did a lot of the website work and things like that, and kind of got a couple other people involved too. So basically, we're a professional association for sales engineers, and I also use the term technical salespeople, technical sales reps. Sometimes, there's some differences between some of these titles, but those are the people that we have, following us and as members. And then, for myself personally, I've been in technical sales for a long time. I also was a project manager for many years. And we actually did a blog article about this back a few months ago, about what are some of the similarities between a project manager and a sales engineer. And there are similarities there. So anyways, some of it's being methodical, it's time management, there's a lot of things, involved there. But anyways, putting out fires as well. So I was a national sales engineer for several years for a building products manufacturer that I handled the whole U.S. Territory. So I know we'll chat a little bit about the differences between selling software and then selling what I call widgets or some kind of other type of product, which is really more of my background.
Yeah, a lot of the times we talk to sales engineers or pre-sales folks, and the focus is either software or networking or IT, like in those three areas.
Yeah.
I've only talked to one other gentleman on this podcast that was a mechanical engineer. Another one was a civil engineer, but he sold software to civil engineers. I haven't talked to someone
Sure,
who sold material like building. He didn't sell building material, but he sold
right.
stuff for buildings, right? To what did you sell exactly?
Yes.
Okay, so
I actually sold. I've sold many things, but I sold for that one specific job. I was selling a composite rebar, which is rebar is obviously it reinforces concrete. So I was heavily involved in infrastructure projects and bridges and all kinds of things and seawalls and all things like that. So it was an actual item. It was a very specific niche item and niche field because most projects would not necessitate composite rebar. Most projects is steel rebar, or basically that's what it is. This was sort of a newer age product, so we had it was sort of like the technological rebar.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question because generally speaking, when you talk about selling rebar, it is somewhat of a commodity. It's less of a
right. Very much.
So how do you differentiate yourself while selling a commodity to specific customers? How do you get them to buy from you, not somebody else?
So I mean, it's different. So with that job, when I was selling the technological rebar, the composite rebar, that I had to, you're always battling price, right? I think no matter what you're doing or what you're selling, you have to come, you have to come to grips with what is it that this costs and what's the ROI, or how do we compare versus the competitor in a commodity market. And I have sold that as well back many years ago, much more of a commodity product. It really is, so if our price is similar to somebody else, or maybe 10% higher, or maybe 20% higher, what am I going to do to create value to make up for that 20%, upcharge? That's what the customer is looking at. So again, that's the same thing. If you're selling a CRM software and you're 20% higher than somebody else, I mean, what are you doing for that 20%? But in this case, it was such a different product and it only fit in certain categories. We didn't really even get into the price. It was sort of like, do it this way with my product, or you're going to have to redo everything that you're doing there. Because, again, not to go down into the engineering world, on that, but, we were being used in areas that were highly sensitive to rusting and corrosion. And so the product that we had did not rust, and steel, of course, rust. So that's the quick version of that. We didn't really get into the price too much.
Okay. So basically you created your own market segment. Well, not you, the company created its own market segment.
Yes.
Kind of like Tesla created its own
Right.
market segment for fast electric cars versus the Nissan Leaf or the Chevy Volt.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were your responsibilities? And like, did you do both sales and the sales engineering role?
Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's a good point. And so this is what I would say to that is, and I've talked to a lot of people, and same people that you've talked to, Ramsey, people like Chris White, and I know you had Eileen McNabb on your show, on your podcast recently. So Eileen is a friend of our association, and she's somewhat involved. And I've talked to her before, and she was on one of our we do insider forums, like conference calls, and she was the guest speaker on one about 6 months ago also. So
nice.
But they're primarily focused, like you just said, on that software and IT and network world. And in those cases, what I believe is that 95% of the time, the sales engineer, where's my The sales engineer, I'm looking for another prop. The sales engineer is partnered with an account executive,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And our account manager, and they work together to, to win that deal or win that business or keep that client. That's usually the case in software, but in a lot of other cases, so in the non-software world, it still can be that way, like you just said, where you have a sales engineer, pre-sales, let's say, and an account rep or account manager. But my job when I was running the sales for outside sales, basically, and technical sales for the US, it was a fairly small company. I did everything. I did all of the sales, all of the prospecting, all of the quasi marketing, on everything. I was calling people looking for payment. All those things are kind of like your typical account manager or sales rep, role. I was doing everything in addition to creating presentations, giving presentations, doing all that kind of really nitty gritty nuts and bolts sales engineering kind of world there.
So I mean, there's a common struggle. Like I am a hybrid, so I do both sales engineering and sales as well for my company, which is not normal. It's outside the norm in my company. And sales engineers, me, I would like to do demos and do proof of concepts and do the technical questions. Salespeople would like to call customers up and set up meetings and all that. When you were doing both, how did you schedule your time so one doesn't slip? Because even if you schedule a meeting with a customer, you still have to come and do a technical presentation, possibly. How do you schedule your time so nothing slips?
Right. Yeah, well, it's hard. So in the prospecting world, and so some of it, for me, it was, I forget what, I'm going to say that the company that you're working for is much more well-known than the company that I was working for. So no one knew what our brand name was, our company name was. No one knew, even many people didn't know that our product existed. Even the product type existed because it was fairly new. So it was very difficult to even get that appointment or to have that initial phone call with somebody. So, I mean, the prospecting and that kind of pounding the pavement was very real. like nothing was going to happen by accident, and no leads were given to me, essentially. So I really had to start it from there. And then that was my first priority. Obviously, if you don't do that, you're not going to get a meeting, right? You're not going to get to do a presentation. So I probably spent, I don't know, 60% of my time trying to get that meeting, and then 40% of my time prepping and planning and doing the presentation, and also all that back and forth of trying to actually bring, because there was no one else essentially. I mean, there were inside people in the company, inside sales, and some estimating help, but to try to bring it from an interested, an RFP, let's say, to a sale, I was a key part of that also. And that takes time too, of course, right? So yeah, I mean, it was hard to manage my time, but I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I also did a lot of, no one in sales, very few people love to do cold calls, and I don't love to do cold calls, but I did plenty of cold calls. But I always would preface that I'm a big LinkedIn fan, and I always would do my best on LinkedIn to reach out and to have a mini conversation on LinkedIn before, or at least a connection before picking up the phone and making that real cold call. So at least it was kind of a lukewarm call. So that was something key.
Okay. So how did you get better at, like, when you reached out I get a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn and like, hey, I just want to connect.
Yeah.
And then I connect with them because they just want to connect. And then they start selling me stuff. How do you do it in such a way that it's like kind of honest and not sleazy, I guess?
Right. So, when I would do it, I would start, and I still do some of this. I mean, and I know there's a lot of flack that you can get for being, right, you say sleazy or trying to be overly direct or whatever, and I get that. again, I don't like people doing that to me every second or every day. But, I would connect with someone that I wanted to connect with. Let's say it is an architect or a developer at blah, 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 New York City, so they connect with me, and I would just keep it simple initially. I would have a response, and in that response, I would say, hey, thanks for the connection, da, 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 make it quick. This is what we do. If you haven't heard of us, this is what we do at blah, 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 Acme Incorporated, and, have our website there, and then just sign it off, best regards, best, and then, my title, and that's it, and my email if they want, and kind of like leave it there. And then, sometimes I would then go back to the well, if you will, like 3 or 4 or 5 days later, if they didn't respond, and maybe like try to, little instigate that a little more, or I just leave it be. And then when I have an actual product or an actual reason to contact them, a project, right, that they're working on, I know they're working on, or their firm is working on, then I would reach out to them on LinkedIn, or I would pick up the phone and say, yeah, we connected on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago. This is Ken, blah, blah, blah. And like that. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah. And then like they take the call at least, most of the time. So I would usually try to do that.
Well, it's interesting because I used to send out a lot of LinkedIn messages or connections to get people to come on the show when I first started. Now, luckily, people want to be on the show. It's not that difficult. But
now you're famous, right?
Yeah, infamous. So I would put in my connection request that this is what I want, and I'm running the risk when I put that in there that I don't even get a connection to begin with. So I don't actually get to do the second touch and third touch and fourth touch, whatever it is. So it's kind of a balance that we have to do. Like if we're honest right from the get-go, then we might lose them right then and there.
Yeah.
But if we're not honest, which kind of sucks, we might get a few touches, and in the end, they might be interested in what we have to sell, what we have to solve their problems. So it is kind of a fine line to work, which I, as a sales engineer, I don't really want to figure out, honestly. I want somebody else to figure out and tell me how to do it. If I'm ever going to be in sales.
Right. I know.
That was the weirdest laugh I've ever done.
But I think it's a good, I'll take your word for it. But no, I was going to say that I think that, people that are, there's a lot of sales engineers. And this is funny, like Chris White, I, read his book there. He has like, top, the top 6 sales engineer traits or something like that. Successful sales engineer traits. So he asked me to read that and do a book report, essentially, right? A kind of a review on that. And he asked me for 2 things. One, to do a review, and we posted that on the association blog page and all that, and it was good. Overall, I think the book was good. But he also asked me, because he's all about the demo, right? And he's clearly selling software and in the software world. And he's like, well, how much of this is relevant for a non-software person, right? Or a non-software sales engineer. And that's of course sort of why he wanted me to kind of go through it. And I would say that, like, and I think you and I chatted about this just a few weeks ago, probably about 85% of what's in his book is definitely relevant for a non-software sales engineer. So the majority of it is, it crosses over, instead of using the word demo, you use the word presentation or, whatever. It is very similar.
Okay. So a question that I get a lot from a lot of the listeners who are not in software, who didn't who studied mechanical and civil, like, if they want to become sales engineers, what are their options to become sales engineers in the civil or mechanical world? Would you be able to help with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like those kinds of things, first of all, anyone who wants to, reach out to me from our website and all that, please, do that. Happy to chat with anyone. And, it's not all about just, trying to be a member or join the organization, but I'm happy to, talk to whoever. There's what I found out there as far as the sales engineer world, and again, I'll say technical sales rep also is sort of similar, is that it's about half and half, where half of the people, and I've done actually a fair amount of research on this, about half of them are in software and, IT, et cetera, and network. and then half of them are in something else that has nothing to do with software. So that's probably a ratio that maybe you didn't consider or
No.
think about, but there's a ton of people that are not in software. So you have, people like myself, I guess you could call it, in the building materials and design world or whatever. But then you have a lot of people in telecom, you have a lot of people in automation and robotics, you have a lot of people in even, biopharma. And then, you have all these kinds of industries, tons of manufacturing and industrial. We get people that are sales engineers for companies that create conveyor belts, right? I mean, there's so many things that plastics and just whatnot. So there's a lot of opportunity for people that are not in software to get into, sales engineer, that they got a mechanical engineer degree or a civil engineer degree. There's plenty of that. I have a good friend of mine that she has a civil engineer degree, and she's a sales engineer, been a sales engineer for 15 years, selling components that go into bridges and things like that. So they're out there.
So if a company creates products, they most likely need someone to sell them, and most likely someone technical to be able to talk about it.
It is. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you cannot, and this is the thing, is that you cannot go into a, top 10, top 20 engineering firm in the country, or architectural firm in the country, let's say, again, I'm just using that as an example, and go in there and be talking to PhDs from MIT and all these things. Not that I'm a PhD from MIT, but you can't go in there without some level of technical expertise and being able to walk the walk a little bit. You can't, they see right through the typical 100% sales spiel or whatever. They want to talk to someone that can get into the details, and they need answers there. They're not there to just listen to a sales pitch for half an hour or an hour.
And in your industry, does someone have to be an engineer to become a sales engineer?
No.
Okay.
So I'm not officially an engineer, or I don't have a PE stamp or anything like that. So, I have a technical degree, but it's not exactly an engineer. So no, you don't have to be an engineer, quote unquote.
Okay. I wrote an article a while back about the confusing names of sales engineering, which is still getting traction right now, a couple of
Right.
years later. And the biggest gripe that some people have, at least I've found that mechanical people have, is that you can't be called a sales engineer unless you have an engineering degree, which I agree and disagree with. Like,
Yeah, I don't think that's right. I disagree with it, obviously. So, but that's, yeah, no, I mean, there's plenty of sales engineers that are not actual engineers, if you want
yeah,
to call it that.
yeah,
But like you said, actually, that article that you did on the different titles of sales engineers,
yeah.
send me a link to that. I'd love to see that, because I'd like to see the titles and the names that you came up with back a couple of years ago, because we may have a use for that, actually.
Sure, I'll send you. It's on LinkedIn. I'll send it to you after we're done here. But yeah, I think the biggest thing was the person was talking about, like, hey, you have to know like stress coefficients and turbine speeds, and dude,
Yeah.
I'm an engineer. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a communications engineer. I know how to send stuff through air. So
Right.
so
Right.
that was the difference in opinion. Okay.
Right.
So why did you start NAASE, North American Association for Sales Engineers? Why did you end up starting?
Right. So we did it really for two reasons. One was that I didn't see that there was really a association out there that was, I'm in the United States, but, US, Canada, Mexico, kind of grouping it together. I wanted to kind of expand it a little bit beyond USA, but, similar markets and economies there in both of those countries. But I wanted to start something that was a professional trade association for sales engineers that are coming from different sectors, and they're different industries, like we're just talking about here, this whole conversation, more than just software and more than just IT, that can actually go to be part of an association. I know there's a couple of other groups out there. There's Pre-Sales Collective is a good group that is really focused on, IT and software and, network, essentially. So they are somewhat similar, right? But not exactly. And then I know that there's the National Society of Sales Engineers is another group out there, which is a great group. That group, and they do focus also on non-software, but they are really focused on college students and, you know, people getting out of college and getting more majors in colleges into this field. So, I mean, it's a little different, not really for someone that's been in the field for 10 years, you know, or so. So there was kind of a gap there, I think, and that's what we've tried to fill with the association. That's one thing. The other reason why we wanted to start it is we wanted to be able to have a means of allowing people to qualify for a professional designation. So that professional designation, we call it Certified Sales Engineer, or, you know, CSE. So that is something that you have to be a member of the association, number one, but then you have to qualify for that. And that is a designation and an actual certificate that the association can give you, and you have an actual certificate, but then you can also use CSE as a professional designation after your name, after, you know, Ken Lambert CSE, or, you know, whatever. Because what we found is most sales engineers out there do not have any designation after the name, right? So some of them, like you just said, that are professional engineers, they have PE after their name, or if you're an MBA, a lot of people that have an MBA put MBA after their name or whatever. But for the most part, if you go look on LinkedIn and scroll down, look, search sales engineers, 90% of them have no designation after their name. And that was something that we thought that was sort of a gap, that maybe some people would like to have a designation after their name. It's sort of a self-promotion, self-marketing, you know, differentiator, if you will.
And you have like certain rules that people have to hit in order to qualify. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, that's right. It's not, I don't want to say it's not that difficult, but if you're a member of the association and you've been a professional sales engineer for at least 3 years, and if you have a Bachelor of Science degree, and if you know, there's a few other criteria. We also look at your LinkedIn profile. We looked at your resume. These are things that you have to submit to the association. So it's not just myself looking at the stuff, just so you know, as far as the association goes. We have Matt Mahoney, who we were on the call with. He's our VP and GM. Then we have 6 people on our advisory board that they also, I just got off the phone with one of them just an hour ago. So they're involved in a lot of the steering and all that. So, you know, we want to make sure that the people that we give the CSE to, you know, they're relevant candidates and relevant people. There's no exam for that. And we sort of did that on purpose. Because again, then we'd have to have various exams for various industries, and, you know, it just, some of it gets a little crazy.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had something you wanted to let the people know.
Oh yes. A little teaser here, Ramsey. I can't get into too much detail, but next week I think we'll probably have something on our website. I hope middle of next week. But this is another gap that I think that there is, and we're going to try to help fill that gap. I believe, I hope. The association is going to conduct a contest, and then subsequently have an award for the Sales Engineer of the Year.
Okay.
And that is going to be something that we're going to be seeking nominations for. And the nominations can be from you yourself, or somebody can nominate you. Obviously, people are going to have to work together on, you know, if someone wants to be nominated. But again, so it's not industry specific. And, you know, a lot of companies have a Sales Engineer of the Year. Your company might have a Sales Engineer of the Year. You know, Citrix and all these different companies, they might have that. And it's a nice, it's something that is a great honor, you know, I mean, to get that. So we're trying to do something industry-wide. Let's see who we get for nominations. And then actually we're going to have an award and a certificate for Sales Engineer of the Year, you know, 2021. And all those details and all that, literally right now we're kind of flushing out. The advisory board will be voting on that. So all of the rules and qualifications we'll probably have out in about a week.
Okay, nice. So this will be out in a few weeks. I'll have, maybe when it's out, I can have the link and put it in the show notes, and people can actually get there. All right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why not? It is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest, and I'm going to ask you and see what you think. So you've been in this sales engineering world for a while. Is there something
Yes.
specific that you love about the role?
I like to be challenged, number one, and I like the competitive nature of it. For me, it's not so much that I'm competing against other coworkers necessarily, and sometimes at different companies there is some of that, right? Some of that mentality, but like if I'm representing a product, like for me, I am representing a product or an assembly or a system or something like that, but if I was selling software and I'm representing Salesforce or whatever it is, you know, and you're going in there and you're trying to win business, and that the purchasing people at that prospect or the client, that they have a whole spreadsheet and a whole rundown of, well, why would I use Salesforce versus, this here versus this here, and they have the whole thing. I love to, go in there beforehand and do the research and say, hey, we are better than we are, in my own mind, we are better than them and them because of this. And I know that they're going to try to say this, but that's not really the case. Like, I like having those kind of conversations and, in a respectful way. Of course, they know that I'm trying to sell the product, right?
Yeah.
So that's a given. But I think you have to know what you're talking about. And you have to know the competition and know what the competition is going to say. And I like kind of digging into the weeds with that. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, like I really equate sales to sports. Imagine having a sports team that don't want to I don't care if I win. Like, you're in the wrong industry.
Right.
No. Yeah, you have to be competitive
Yeah.
to be successful in sales in general and as a sales engineer. Yeah. So what would you change about the role?
So I've worked the job that I just told you about, that I was doing everything, quote unquote. I don't want to say that I did everything, but pretty much. And then I've also worked in roles where I had a, account rep or a sales rep that I was working with and all that. So I've kind of done both of them. So I kind of get and I've just done really straight sales. Nothing complicated, just trying to sell stuff. So, I get all of that. What would I change about it? As far as sales engineers go, a role that I had fairly recently, I was doing a lot of work and working hard and, typical stuff. And this is something that a lot of sales engineers will say is that, hey, why am I getting paid? I'm working my butt off, et cetera. And why am I getting paid, 60% or 70% or whatever it is of like the top line, the really good sales reps or account managers, they're just doing sales, use that in quotes, like it's a bad thing, just doing sales. I don't think it's a bad thing. But but that's how I felt even too at a prior job of, someone's making, I know, just the rumor mill, I know they're making, whatever, some obscene amount of money, and they're good. They're good at what they do. But I think I'm good at what I do, and what's going on? So I think there's some of that, it's jealousy, it's whatever. And I don't know how that gets changed. So I guess what I'm saying is it'd be nice if, hey, every sales engineer out there, tomorrow they got a 20% raise, but that's probably not going to happen, right? So
I think that goes for every single role. Like if people wanted, almost everybody wants a raise.
Right.
The reason I see salespeople get paid more than we do is risk. Right. And if you want to get paid as much as salespeople get paid, maybe you should go into sales and have that responsibility, because you're not having, as a sales engineer, we don't have the VP of sales calling us at 10 o'clock at night telling us, hey, why haven't you closed this deal that's due tomorrow or the day before? So that's how I see it.
You're right.
But yeah, I would love a raise. So if my boss is listening.
Right.
Question number 3 is there a book or resource you think every sales engineer should read or watch or whatever it is?
Your show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think they're already watching the show.
Oh, there you go. That's right. If they're on this, then they're already doing it.
Yeah. Is there another one?
I mean, It's going to depend, on their, there's all the industry stuff, right? So, I mean, getting beyond the industry differences, because obviously the industries are very different. Um, you know, I've read, several business books and all that, and including some about sales engineers, but um, I can't think of one that really sticks out like this is a must read. Um, and again, it does depend on what side of the spectrum. Like, are you doing sort of more sales? Or are you really doing more sales engineering, more engineering? So it kind of varies. I'll give one quick plug. Read our blog page. We have a lot of good info on there, and it does vary on the subject matter and the writers. And I do a lot of freelance writing, and I've written probably about a third or 25% of all of the blog articles on our page. But we have a lot of guest writers and people that have, we sift through them and decide like this is a good topic that we want to talk about. So I think that's let's try to stay on top of things.
Yeah. So what if people want to go and read your blogs and get some information? What's the email? What's the website? I've been trying to log
The
in.
website is sales. There you go. It's sales-engineering.org.
Oh yeah, I have that bookmark. I was searching for NAC. Okay, there it is. All right, so there's the blog section
Oh,
there.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would recommend everybody to come and take a look because one of my blogs is going to end up on here someday. So stay tuned for that, hopefully.
Soon enough, right?
Yeah. All right, last question of the not so fire round.
Awesome.
Is there a habit that great sales engineers have that you've noticed?
I would say not giving up, and also not being afraid to learn more. I mean, I think that's a huge thing, is that when you're in a competitive marketplace, and a lot of times the things that we are all selling are pretty intricate, and we're trying to solve pretty relatively complicated business problems, right, for the client or the prospect. So I mean, you always have to be learning stuff. You always have to be researching what about this company and looking at that. Like, so don't be you can't just sit on your hands, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't think you're going to do very well if you just think that, oh, I know everything. I think that's going to come back and bite you. So I think always learning and not giving up. And sometimes you are going to lose. You're going to lose the deal. You're going to lose the client, or it's not going to work out. But you got to kind of be able to just pick yourself up and keep rolling.
Before we go, I do want to say something. You mentioned that Chris White is focused on demos, which what the name would imply, but since I've been talking to him, his focus is not really the demo. He's been focused more on the partnership. He's focused on all of sales in general. It's just his title maybe a little bit deceiving. I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know. I've been thinking about that for a bit. Before we go, where can people reach out to talk to you?
Yeah, well, on LinkedIn, that would be great. So on LinkedIn, we have a company page, an association page, and it's just North American Association of Sales Engineers. Someday we're going to find a shorter name, but until then, that's it. So I would go there, follow us there, but our website has a lot of good info. Obviously, you can email us and myself at, info@sales-engineering.org as well. We have a phone number as well. It's all on the website. So, we're happy to talk with anyone. And the membership is growing. Anyone can be a member. I was sort of joking with the association is for sales engineers, of course, but we're not going to turn down a baker that wants to be a member. I'm sure they can be a member, but that's sort of a half. That's right. It's a half joke, but we'll take it. Right. So no, but that said, and we hope people check us out at least. That's all.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ken. I appreciate the time you spent with me here, and I hope to talk to you soon. So thanks, Ken, for coming on. Thank you for listening to this show. So we did mention the North American Association for Sales Engineers with Ken, and he wanted to talk or he wanted to let you know that now they have launched the Sales Engineer of the Year award. So if you know anyone who you would want to nominate, make sure you nominate them to Ken and his organization. You can find the link to that in the show notes, or if you want to learn more, you can find the link in the show notes at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show 160. Also, if you know any civil engineers or mechanical engineers who are not aware of the sales engineering role these are my kids, in their industry, let them know that there is a path to sales engineering. And if you don't want to do that, maybe you should just forward this chat with Ken to them. So as always, I appreciate you guys being here. And with that, this is Ramsey signing off.